reviewed only by the editor. And the other part, that is the short reports, case series, have to undergo this peer review process. If we look at the publication time, yes, it's fastest among all the articles which are there in the table of content of any journal. The fastest, I would say, would be because there is always a time constraint if you want to write a comment to a published article. Now, every journal, you have to look at the guidelines. Each journal is going to give some specific time where you can write this comment to any published article. It might vary. Some journals are from the print, when this article is printed or comes in the print issue. So that can vary from 8 weeks to 12 weeks. Like here we have in IJ, we have 8 weeks. Some journals allow it till 12 weeks, but between that time period, you need to write that. Okay, so the time of publication is also fast. For some journals, it's really quick, between 1 to 2 weeks, but at times it might vary depending upon how frequently the journal comes out. So it can be from 1 to 2 months as well. While it takes a little longer for other types like a brief report or a case series, because they have to undergo a peer review process. So let's come to the most common section, that is how to write a comment let's talk about the comment to a published article. So basically, this comes under the category of post-publication review. So what do you understand by post-publication? When you are writing an article, when you're writing any type of an article, so it has to undergo a review process first between the editor and the author, then between the reviewer and the author. So there is some communication, some debate going on. The authors keep on answering those queries, but those are not published. So but some can get missed. Some of these errors can get missed. Some of the methodological flaws can get missed during this process. So once this article comes in a printed form and a reader is going to read it, he might notice these small deficiencies and would like to communicate or ask the author about them. So this is what is a comment to a published article. As I told you, it is time sensitive, depending upon the type of journal, varying between maybe 8 weeks, 12 weeks. So it gives you a specific time. Once the article is published, between a specific time, you can write and ask your query to the author through the editor. And very true, it's journal specific. So it's actually the journal in which that article is published is going to write that comment about that published article only. So what exactly do we want to write there? So now if the reader wants to discuss some controversial aspects or seek clarification regarding any published article, which interests him, these can be methodological concerns, or he finds that there is some concerns regarding the conduct of the study, or he feels that the interpretation, some changes maybe can affect the interpretation or conclusions, and he wants some clarifications regarding those. So he should write to the letter or he can ask the author through a letter to editor. Sometimes that's a common field of interest to us, any article. So you also have some data. You can give some insight, new insight to it, new objective to it, maybe share your own viewpoint, maybe you can share your own data. So this also can be asked, can be written to the editor through a letter to the editor. So basically, as I told you, so this was a very interesting thing which was published in JAMA, which told that these letter to editors form a form of the first scientific discourse. There is a discourse which goes on between the author and the reviewer, author and the editor, but those are not published. Okay, you make your changes in the manuscript, but once it's published and this letter, once it's written, it forms the part of the permanent biomedical record, which gets linked to the scientific article for which it is published through its citation in the database. So that becomes a part of the publication. Very early in my career, when I joined PGI, like 12 years back, I was moderating my first journal club when I came across this article. This was the first article which I was moderating as a as an assistant professor. So when you are moderating for the first time, you tend to read it extensively. And when I was reading, I realized that there was some issues, methodological issues, which I was not able to clearly understand. So for this, I wrote down to the editor very politely, asking him that I feel that this article is of actually great clinical relevance, but there are certain methodological issues for which I would like to have some clarification. And the author was really kind enough to provide some additional information which could help clear my doubts which were regarding this study. So this is how you go about, you can actually satisfy your inquisitiveness through this. There is another aspect also. This was another article which was published, which showed that the TreeView PCD video laryngoscope aided in nasotracheal intubation. So one of my friends, a very close friend, Dr. Nishkash, he wrote down sharing his own data, saying that it's not just the video laryngoscope, but a newer technique like a cuff inflation technique, which could actually aid in nasotracheal intubation if you're using a video laryngoscope. So that was, if you are doing that work, if that topic is of interest to you, you can share your thing, you can read it extensively, you can analyze it, you can add something more to the literature through these letter to editors. But important thing is how to write it. Now, whenever you are writing it, make sure that read the guidelines, what they state. The word limit, the number of references, what they want, the number of authors which are allowed, how many figures, exactly what amount of. So you need to actually see these guidelines. Be very polite. Okay, always address this as sir, madam, or to the editor. This again would be specified in the will be specified in the guidelines. Okay, so make sure that you read these guidelines very properly and very carefully. Always start with a very courteous note. I read with great interest your article, and try to congratulate. It's not easy doing a study. So always try to congratulate the authors on their work. And then be very professional and put forth your points or concerns, point A, B, C, and very clearly. It should not summarize what they are saying. You just put what are your clarification, what points you need the author to clarify. So if I look at IJA, it very clearly mentions that the maximum amount of the word limit allowed is 250, not more than 4 references. So for each journal where you want to publish this or you want to write this comment, make sure you have read the guidelines, which tells you about the word count, the references, the tables, and everything. So never assume a rude attitude. That's okay, you have made these flaws, how are you going to answer? So that's not the idea behind it. You want your inquisitor, your query to be answered. Be polite, make rather specific comments. Don't make general comments like this. So when we are looking at a letter to editor to accept that, this is what and support all these comments should be supported by some scientific evidence. Therefore, if you have those general comments, it lacks weight. The chances are your letter to editor is not going to be accepted. Do not repeat the topics which the author has already studied. And most importantly, be brief, be concise, and be very clear what exactly you want to ask. So if you are short and concise, the chances of your letter to editor being accepted is high. Why commonly I reject these letter to editors are if the article, if just for the heck of it, some people write down irrelevant, biased comments. So these do not get them through these publications, or they are too long. The message is not very clear. They've tried to use some aggressive language, although we try to modify these languages, but many a times that puts the editor also in a not in a good front, that he would also not like to accept those letters. If there are too many figures, too many tables, too much data to be sure. This is a very short report which you need to understand, and you should be very clear what you want to write. Other than this comments, the International Committee of the Editors recommends that the publication of any letter should ideally be accompanied with the answer also. Okay, so when we get a comment to any published article, it's generally communicated to the author, and we actually would appreciate if the author also gives back the reply. Writing a reply is not an easy task. It's never easy to take any criticism against the work which you have done. So basically, we should think in the light that it's not exactly the criticism. The people have read your work and now they want to ask you or maybe know more about that. So do not try to be defensive. Acknowledge the concerns of the writers. Again, the language, the way you write is very important. Be very, very humble in writing the reply as well. Show that you are open to considering their thing, and maybe if certain things they have pointed out which you might not agree with, give a reason for that. Maybe it can be unethical, maybe it was too costly, or it would take a lot of time. So give some clarification so which can satisfy the reader. So that's the aim of this reply. While when I was writing this study on comparing dexmedetomidine and propofol in OSA patients, we also got a reader who was quite interested, and he pointed out that you have conducted this study in supine positions, and you have not taken into consideration the concept of positional OSA, which is very common. So I really liked this this idea that he had gave us a thought to ponder about, that okay, this concept also exists, we should be evaluated. But although this I could satisfy my reader by saying that probably our patients were randomized, so the chances of having this positional obstructive apnea was equal in both the groups. But in the next study, when I did on OSA patients, I made sure that we evaluated how many patients were having this positional OSA. So that gives more insight to the topic which you are studying, if you get a letter to editor. So basically what I feel is why you should be writing as a writer, as a researcher, why you should be writing a letter to editor is if you start thinking about the same topic. Like, as I told you, what I did in my first JC, which I was moderating, it boosts your analytic power. Okay. And it gives you a stepping stone to, basically a stepping stone towards being a good reviewer. Because if you are a researcher, you have to be a good reviewer also. Okay, that's a part of being one characteristic of a researcher, to be a good reviewer. So it gives you more experience in drafting the manuscript according to the guidelines, because these are the letter to editors are one form which have to give a very clear message in very small words. So you get a knack of writing very clear, in a very clear language. And above all, publication to everyone, be it an assistant professor, be it a PG student, is always a feel-good factor. Yes, there are certain disadvantages, because once it's rejected, this letter to editor of this form is rejected, you do not have many options, because the only place it's going to be accepted is the journal which had published that article. It is time consuming. It's never so easy to criticize a person if you do not know the facts. You have to do your homework well. And definitely academically, it has less impact. It was an interesting banter which I came across when I was reading. Once I was reading. So there is actually two sorts of people. One who read these research papers, and the others who read and criticize. I would say I belong to this lot. And what encourages me to do that, I could really identify that. If that topic is of interest to you and you find that there is certain deficiency, or maybe you can add something there, that gives you a kick to write. And I think you should not leave that kick. You should not leave that vigor. But definitely the people who are of the other, on the other side, would definitely say that if the author rejects, if the person doesn't reply back, then this can discourage, but that should not discourage you. It always, I think, boosts your confidence once you get a reply, once you have, that satisfies your queries as well. So that was one part, a major chunk. The other interesting part, which are covered in this letter to editor sections, are short reports. Now, the journals, to boost their impact factor, have started accommodating short reports that are basically shorter versions of the original research work which has been done. So basically, they resemble the original article, but are more concise. Why we use it? Many times the journal gives you an option of publishing it in a shorter form because the data is not that elaborate. Or if I myself want to communicate my results, get the article published quickly, then maybe this form works well. So that depends upon what exactly, but these are very common forms which are now being published. So when you're writing a research letter in the form of a short report or a brief communication, make sure that you check the journal guidelines, especially on the word count, the authors, the references, the tables, the figures, because like an original article, 6 figures, 6 tables are not going to be allowed. It's a very short report. You need to be very clear. So that's why there is always a restriction. If I'm very fond of publishing in European journal because that gives you a more liberal word count of 1,000 words to write down a shortened version of an original report, and they're fast enough to publish it also. So there should be not, although, so when you are reading, you should know that how much word limit is allowed, how many authors are allowed. So I keep on repeatedly saying, because they do not like extra things to be accommodated. So draft your letter accordingly. In Canadian journal, you have slightly lesser word limit of 600 words to publish your original work. So this is just to give you an example. This was one of the study which was done by us, just a very simple one, like holding a face mask using either a CE or a modified VE technique in edentulous patients. So the data was not that elaborate. And therefore, the journal gave us an option of writing it in the form of a correspondence or a letter to editor format. So we went through, it hardly took us maybe 1 year for this, 1 month for it to be accepted. So this process is definitely much faster than you're getting your original article published. So in Canadian also, this allows you a smaller word limit of 600 words, but they also accommodate these original works written in a very shorter format. Other than this, as I told you in IJA, we take the case reports, case series, how they are written. I'm sure Dr. Sanish is going to talk about that. But cases that describe novel approaches or diagnosis for management, or they provide warnings about the potential hazards, are more likely to be accepted by any journal. Now, an important question arises. These case reports are published as case reports also in a case report section, and as nowadays, many times in correspondence section. So do we want to go about writing in a correspondence section? Yes, to get it an early acceptance, we should go about. And if I look from the journal's perspective, there are more chances that the journal is going to accept your case report in the format of a correspondence than as a case report. Why? So an impact factor of a journal is decided by the number of citations to the number of the articles in 2 years span. So if I look at the case report, then they are just included in the denominator. And we all know these case reports are less likely to be cited in comparison to any other form of like your original article or your reviewers. So in contrast, these correspondence are not included in the denominator. So if if any journal, which I believe all journals are sensitive to their impact factor, it will definitely publish fewer case reports. Therefore, if you want to get your thing published, even your case report or case series, it's a very good idea to write it in a concise form, in a shorter form, and get it through in a correspondence section. What exactly I'm looking for in a good case report? A clear message should always be there. A clear educational value which can benefit my readers. Yes, definitely a rarity, novelty, or a case well done accounts, but that's somehow an insufficient criteria as far as I'm concerned when I'm looking at a case report. Any case report which gives some ambiguous message or does not comply to the normal standard of care, standard of anesthesia care which we provide, are a complete no from my side. And in case, if any patient is involved, make sure you have taken the patient consent. That is mandatory nowadays. If you do not have that, please do not go through the whole process of even writing a case report and getting it published. So this was just to give you an example. This no-date technique, it's just the fancy name. Otherwise, the thing which we got published in IJ was not very, very novel. But it gave a very clear message that if you are in a low resource setting, you do not have to depend upon the high flow or anything very extensive to get these coblation surgeries. A small nasal cannula can also benefit. So these are the small, clear, educative messages which can get through in the case report section or a letter to editor section in a case report form. Stitch in time save. This was just an example of a case report on a massive tumor embolism, which I had written. I actually purposely took this one because at times I feel when I'm writing to an international journal a case report in the correspondence form, it's if you have a catchy name, sometimes that helps you get through, not always, but I just wanted to add, if you can actually think of a nice catchy name, that at times helps you get through this. So in conclusion, a letter to editors, what we believe are just the comments to the published articles, but it also includes the brief reports, case reports, and there are more chances that these things can be accepted in letter to editor, provided they are formatted well. These initial publications can give you a real boost in your career when you are just starting your research career. And to me, if you talk about, because I'm really critical when I'm analyzing any research paper, so it can add a significant perspective and depth to the literature if I talk about the letter to editors which are published in response to the published articles. Thank you. Yeah, there's.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for bringing the nitty-gritties of publication in the letter to editor format. And I'm sure that if we keep those things in mind, I usually say one thing, it's just not the authors who need publication, it's also the editors who need good publication in the journal. So I think we are on both sides floating on the same track. We want good publications. And I think Dr. Divya's tips and key messages will help you to make those publication in a faster way. I remember working for ICA nowadays, the rejection rates may be a little higher because if we don't take care of these points and we try to reproduce the things which are already known, I think no editor will like to, I can put a very blunt word, waste the pages of journal and the time of the readers to read the same thing which is already known because everybody of you are so busy. So be succinct, be specific, and what you want to have, something should be novelty. And in the same flow, I think we'll come to the next session, which will be part of same. Dr. Divya mentioned that we are moving away from case reports because it impacts or disimpacts certain aspects of the journal. We will coming whether and how we can take the case reports and cases because they are equally important. And there is none other than a better person than Dr. Sudhesh Kanan. He is professor, Bangalore Medical College and Research Institute. He has a vast experience, a prolific writer, a researcher and academician, a gentleman, absolutely a thorough gentleman. And He is just not the editor for ICA for very long. He's also has taken one journal to a greater heights, and that is Karnataka Anesthesia Journal. Looking future into Sudesh for many more novel activities in this field. Over to you to put up us nitty-gritties, how to take the case reports. Dr. Divya mentioned editors are not interested to publish it. Let's see how you can make it publishable, or what key points will make it publishable in certain journals. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Rakesh sir, for your wonderful and kind introduction. At the outset, I would like to thank Radhakrishnan sir and Dr. Sanish and yourself, Dr. Rakesh, and all other the team of ICA for giving me this wonderful opportunity on this platform. So today I'm going to talk briefly or quickly about how to write a case report and what an editor expects from an author when reviewing a case report. So William Osler initially, once upon a time, had told that always note and record the unusual, publish it, or at least save it on a save it as a permanent record, as a short or concise note. And such communications are always of value. And these words, where you take it from me, they are definitely useful, because many a times these are the things which give us a cue to survive or get through the day when you come across tight situations. So now, what is a what is a case report? Case report is nothing but a detailed report of symptom, signs, diagnosis, treatment, and follow-up of an individual patient. Most of the times, they are the ones which are cornerstones of medical progress, because they were the ones which initiate the interest in that particular field. And many a times, they do provide new ideas in the field of medicine. And in the present world, in the present era, where most of the private practitioners and many of the consultants are very busy in their clinical work, it provides a sort of platform where they can do rapid, short communications between the busy clinicians, and also it opens doors for a lot of research. Whereas case series is nothing but an extension of case report, where when you report more than similar type of more than 3 cases of similar magnitude or similar type, and it can go up to maximum of 10 to 20 cases. And when you present such a series of things without having some statistical work done, this is known as case series. Now, as we all know, the present NMC guidelines does accept even case series as the one of the things for considering for promotion and all your academic growth. So therefore, case report and case series are not something very small, and it has to be dealt with seriously and with a lot of interest. So now, why are case reports published? Most of the times, case reports are published when you notice sudden there is an unexpected association between diseases or symptoms. Sometimes you can also notice an unexpected event in the course of observing or treating a patient. Findings sometimes can shed new light on the possible pathogenesis of a disease or an adverse effect. Most of the time, sometimes it can help us trying to assess the cause of a particular problem. And sometimes it can even represent a unique or rare features of disease. And many times it helps in understanding some unique therapeutic approaches, especially out of the box thinking, etc. And sometimes it can bring into light some of the variations in anatomical success, because no two humans are same in all the aspects. They usually deal with unusual observations and adverse response to therapies most of the times. Sometimes it can also present some unusual combination of conditions which can result in therapeutic confusion, like what to go. For example, when you have a regurgitant and a simple thing, sometimes you can have a regurgitant lesion and a stenotic lesion. And many times there is always a confusion regarding what is the ideal technique of anesthesia. So invariably in such situations, sometimes these kind of case reports do provide light into management of such patients. Sometimes it can also help in illustration of a new theory, or it can even question regarding the existing current understanding or theory due to some abnormalities in the findings. And sometimes it can also give a lot of personal impact. So why writing of case? Mostly, if you see the list of ladder of evidence tables these days, RCTs and meta-analysis and systematic reviews are considered the top of the evidence. They're considered as the top of scientific evidence. However, the case reports are at the bottom. But having said that, it's not necessary that case reports are just rejected, but they do have a lot of value in their own regards, for the simple reasons that many times it can provide a valuable source of new ideas and information. Many times this cannot be done as a clinical study, but many times you just see it can spark a new idea or spark a new information, which can provoke a thought for conducting a research. Many times it can also introduce new treatment for novel diseases and lead to new research and advances in clinical practice. Apart from detecting novelties and generating hypotheses, it also helps a great way in detecting pharmacovigilance. Many of the times, a drug can be introduced after phase 3 and phase 4 trials. However, following the phase 3 trials, it's not always that the drug has to generate a beneficial effect itself. Many times it can uncover or uncover some of the undetected side effects which are not detected in phase 1, phase 2, or phase 3 clinical trials. So therefore, these kind of case reporting is very important in the addition of such kind of knowledge to the scientific literature. And also, it has got a very high applicability, especially when certain situations where ethical issues or moral issues come into the fact, and it can avoid research being conducted. However, it has got certain limitations or disadvantages. That is, we cannot generalize the observations noted from a single case report, and therefore you have to take it with a pinch of salt. It's not always necessary that we can establish a cause-effect relationship by reading one case report or one case series. And many times there is always a tendency for us to overinterpret the observations of that particular case to all general cases. Many times we just say that, oh, that case report has reported a successful outcome with particular technique, and you try to adopt the same thing in all other conditions, and you may end up in a disaster. Not only this, many a times it so happens that the authors and the publishers may always think of only positive outcomes, and sometimes they may not report or may not publish the ones with negative outcomes. So therefore, again, it can indulge in a publication bias. Being a retrospective design, there are a lot of flaws, which are technical flaws, which were not covered during conduct of that particular case, and therefore it might not throw uniform light into various possibilities when it is practiced at different circumstances. So, having said all these things, do you think still that the case report is a linear thing? No, because as I told, it has got so many potential benefits in the field of scientific literature. There was a need for, as discussed by our previous speaker, most of the journals have come down on publishing the case reports. However, they realized in 2012 or 2013 that the importance of case reports, and they felt that there has to be a separate journal so that which can publish only case reports. Therefore, the important valuable information of individual cases or individual things cannot be missed out. So therefore, a lot of new journals which published solely the case reports came in, such as American Journal of Case Reports, our BMJ case reports, Anesthesiology case reports. This tells that this very clearly says that case reports are not a meager things, and they do occupy an important place in the scientific literature. So now, once you know that it is a very important thing it holds an important place in scientific literature. Now, how do you ensure that there is a uniformity in reporting of cases so that they are accepted by standard journals and they are published easily? So as we go through this Equator network, which instead of enhancing the quality and transparency of research, health research, this is a network which brought in various guidelines for reporting of various types of clinical material. So, for example, for if you see the randomized control trials, it brought in consort statement, and likewise for case reports, they came out with something called CARE, or case reporting guidelines, for a CARE guidelines, which consists of a set of questionnaires. If you just click on that particular extension, you can see a series of questions which you have to tick before submitting the case report to a particular journal. So if you have ensured that all the points, that it consists of 14 points, and if you are sure that all the 14 points are covered in your case report before submitting, there is a very high likelihood that your case reports can be accepted and published by the standard journals. Now, coming to the contents of the case report. A case report generally consists of 5 important aspects, that is the abstract, introduction, case report, proper, discussion, conclusion, and references. Many times this conclusion may not be a part of a case report presentation in some of the channels. However, it can be a separate, or it can be a part of discussion as well. Now, coming to the abstract. Abstract basically summarizes the entire case, the problem it's addressing, and the message it is trying to convey in a simple, short, small paragraph. So therefore, it's very evident. It is very understood. It is easily understood that it has to be crisp and precise with important details, so that it can grab the attention of the persons who are reading. Generally, we have two types of abstract, that is a structured abstract and unstructured abstract. Structured abstract is most often for review articles. It is more for RCTs, whereas for these kind of case reports, it is generally unstructured, which means that you have to just bring in a single paragraph containing all the details. And usually it has to be very short, and most of the journals do not accept any abstract beyond 150 words. And it's important that no references have to be cited in abstract. These are some of the important points which have to keep you in mind. Many a times, if you don't keep such things in mind, this can be an irksome to the editor, and this can increase the chances of rejection. Now, coming to the introduction, most of the introduction of a case report will generally give a brief overview of the problem that the case addresses, or the case report is trying to address, with some amount of statistical background regarding the incidence of that particular problem and how rare that it is. Because the reason why we have to include all these things is because this is the one which emphasizes the need for publishing this particular case report. And therefore, it should always be supported with citation of relevant literature wherever necessary, so that the editor understands that you have done a thorough background literature search before you went into write this case report. And it's very important that you have to highlight what important or what unique is in this case report, which makes it worthy of publication. You have to hit at the introduction itself, so that the once the editor or the author reads that, or the reader reads this, he feels that there is something worthy of it, which makes it unique, and he tries to continues to read it further. And generally, this entire introduction part can end with a single sentence which describes the patient's condition in which he is suffering from. So therefore, that gives that gives an insight to the author what to next, what does he expect in the subsequent case report. In the case report, you have to be very, very explicit, and it has to be a detailed description of the entire thing. It should contain the age, and it should contain the proper patient details, which includes age, occupation, etc. Whatever is most relevant to this particular case report in hand. And it should have a clear history of symptoms, presentation regarding its duration, and the presence of comorbidities, and what led the patient to particular problem, and how that problem how it presented with the issue regarding the management. It should also be, nevertheless, don't forget to mention the important physical examination points in the assessment of case. It should also, it's always better to include pathological tests and other relevant investigations, whatever it is, to support the case, so that all these things will help in bringing out why exactly you try to manage the patient in a different way, or in a different manner which is slightly away from the standard technique. You can also mention the various treatment options that were decided, and what was the expected outcome, and what you did, and ultimately what was the actual outcome noted in the patients. And the alterations in the treatment plan due to the inherent patient problems has to be clearly, explicitly explained in the case report. And one of the important things you have to mention in the case report is that you have ensured patients' safety, and you have ensured patients' confidentiality while reporting this case, and where you are not going to indulge in any patient identification factors when you're reporting the case report, unless it is very much necessary. Now, coming to the discussion part. Discussion part is the part which will try to convince the editor or the reader that this case is publication worthy. So therefore, it's nothing but the expansion of details which are mentioned in the introduction, but you should also justify as to why this particular patient was managed in that particular way with adequate scientific support, and what were the various situations which led to the management of the patient such a particular way. And also, it's important to highlight the important positives and limitations while managing the case. It might be limitation of the equipment, limitation of the situations where you have handled that patient. For example, it might be an open air situation, or it might be an mass casualty situation, or anything like that, which specifically resulted in managing the bringing out some of the limitations in management of the patient, so that you are properly justified in your management. You should very clearly mention whether there is corroboration or detraction of your management from the existing understanding or existing current knowledge, and why such kind of a corroboration or detraction occurred in your particular case. This will give more strength to your case management aspect. Finally, coming to the conclusion, the concluding remarks the conclusion should have a clear concluding remarks regarding the case. It's important to note that you don't repeat whatever you mentioned in the discussion or whatever you mentioned in the methodology case report section again in the conclusion. Conclusion should be very precise, brisk, and it should be very clear. And it preferably as far as possible, as short and succinct as possible. Sometimes some of the journals do ask for a summary, and you can add that particular summary in conclusion if it is desired by the specific journal. Authors' suggestions and recommendations were suggested in some of the earlier journals. However, the present journals do not ask for author suggestion because it is usually, it can be, there is always a possibility of bias here because you are actually entirely dependent on one particular case when you make a suggestion. So therefore, it can sometimes send a wrong signal, or it can result in a cautious mode of things. So coming to a note on patient consent, it's one of the most important ethical requirement for any studies or even reporting of case report. A written consent from the patient is a must before submitting the case report. And therefore, if the patient is a minor, parental consent, or if the adult is unable to give consent, then you can go for closest family members to give the consent. Patient anonymity, as said, is an important requirement while reporting cases, and adequate shielding of patient identity during publishing of images, etc., is very important. Coming to some of the do's and don'ts while publishing case reports, you tell the case report in the form of stories. Basically, you arrange them in the proper chronological order so that the author, the reader can get a visual impression of what exactly happened, and specify about your differential diagnostic considerations very clearly so that will add to or that will substantiate the way you manage the particular case. Get the details right. It's very important, because when the author when the reader or the editor reads, and if he finds that there are certain missing points in your case report narration, that can result in a negative impact. It's always important to ratify the differential diagnosis, both positive and negative, during the your presentation. Employ pictures and preserves wherever relevant, because they are worth 1,000 words, and it has to be clearly and efficiently illustrated via images. Formulate short and sharp titles. As Madam was telling in the previous talk, it should be sharp and eye-catching, and therefore it can result in greater chances of reading and publication. And also, it has to be short and clear. Don'ts. Do not write your case report before doing a proper homework. Suppose if you don't do a thorough literature search, and if a similar article is published in elsewhere or earlier, there is always a chance that your article can get rejected. And ensure that missing details are kept to a minimum, especially with regards to crucial documents and points. Do not publish a case report without patient's consent. This is a very, very important aspect, and it can result in reputation and relationship damage. Do not include everything. Don't go on blabbering so many things. Many times, less is more. You can restrict to most important aspects, and you can deliberate on that only. Do not discuss in the discussion part. Don't go on discussing every single aspect of patient's disease and try to justify each and everything. Most important points has to be discussed. Only those things have to be justified. Coming to what editors look into, this is the last part of my talk, where what the editors look into a case report when they publish. When the moment they see the case report or the title and the initial abstract, they look for 4 important aspects. One is uniqueness, whether they have documented properly, and whatever they have done, have they interpreted in the right direction, and they have represented in the properly in the manuscript. And finally, whether they have used some of the objective methods to manage the patient, or the management of the patient is totally subjective without use of proper scientific literature review. And finally, how much educational value does it impart in the scientific society? And most important, but not the least, is its impact on the clinical practice. All these things are just the moment they quickly glance to the case report and see whether all these points are ticked. Once these points are ticked, then subsequently they'll go into the further articles, further deep into the write-up. So therefore, you ensure that the instructions to authors are followed stringently, because that is the next thing. So if you see in our ICA, it's very clearly mentioned what exactly has to contain, what are the various headings under which the article has to be written, and what all things have to be included and how it has to be included. And of course, one of the most important issues they look into is whether ethical issues are taken care of, whether with regards to consenting, proper blinding, etc., has been done or not. So therefore, you clearly and explicitly mention these things in your manuscript. They look for, once they are done with these basic things, they further detailed review of the article will look into the authenticity and the genuineness, and if there is any conflict of interest, and whether the proper restriction of word count is followed. And it's very imperative that you use a good language and grammar when you're reporting your case. It's not only for case report, but it's good for all the type of publications. By mentioning good language, I won't say that you should write a poetic language like Shashi Tharoor, but it has to be a simple scientific language where it is easily understood by most of the readers. And second thing, avoid use of too many jargons. Try to avoid use of adjectives and like this is my view, this is our way of management, etc., because that indicates that you are there's no a sense of general purpose there. You're trying to portray your own thinking and thing. Then always ensure that you are given attention to details and proper numbering of some of the smaller things, such as proper numbering of tables, figures, and its illustration in the text. And therefore, and also important thing is that you cite the references and quote the references properly in the article as well as in the list of references, and also use only most relevant references. Just don't go on dumping all the references because they are available. Now, coming to some of the common causes of rejection. Most of the times they are not valid for the scope of results or scope of the journal, or sometimes it not. That particular journal will not be working on that particular field of in that particular field which the article is being written. Sometimes, most of the times, it's that does not follow the basic journal guidelines. So therefore, I emphasize that you have to go through the instructions of authors before writing and publishing the submitting the manuscript to the particular journal. Sometimes it doesn't match to the current clinical needs. Many times you will be talking about an obsolete practice which is not relevant anymore. So therefore, it might not be accepted. Sometimes it might not be unique or interesting, as I told. If you don't do a thorough literature search, this is the problem. Problems with the references, your referencing style and your references quoted will be very old. Last, but one of the most important problems these days is plagiarism. You just copy some other's work and just publish it here. So with this, I would the take-home message would be case reports are very important, and they do form an important link between the clinical research and the scientific practice. And that gives an important scope for a lot of busy practitioners to express their experiences. And a good case report written based on a thorough scientific knowledge and a good review of literature is a very high chance of getting accepted. Case series are still considered as one of the things for your publication. So therefore, don't think that case reporting is doesn't have any values. So these are my references. Thank you for your patient hearing. Sorry.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir, for taking this important topic, because as an author, as a reader, sometimes we are perplexed with many of the aspects of case reports, and you have taken it. We'll be having certain questions. We'll take it after another 2 sessions, but yes, nicely covered. So let's move on to a very important article, because when you want to read some journal, you want to, because interpreting the original articles or the case reports becomes difficult. As a clinician, we want something which is ready-made, and some of the expert may provide us a concrete sentence that you manage this patient using this technique. And that's why we're looking for the clinical textbooks where, as initial residents, we can learn those things. And that's why we sometimes try to look for the review articles which are expert of team in that particular area, try to guide us the management things. But yes, there will be some nitty-gritties, because if I write something, I will be biased a little bit about what I do, and I try to emphasize those things, and I want the word to do the same way. Dr. Pradeep is smiling, and I'm sure he can understand that reading a review articles requires a lot of understanding, even for how to read a review article. I'm sure he will take us through that, what editors are looking for those participants who are listening to us. What topic and how the review articles, they are different type, and he will be bringing it. And the right person to talk on for this topic, the review articles, is Dr. Pradeep Dongre. He is a senior consultant at ESIC Medical College and PGIMSR Bangalore. He has a great interest in research, editing, and other aspects, which he is an expert. He do a lot of systematic review and meta-analysis, one of the big shots now in various systematic reviews and meta-analysis. And he has many credentials to it. And I think he's the most apt person to talk on this topic, how to get a review article published, what the editors are looking for. Over to you, sir, Dr. Pradeep Dongre.
Good evening, everyone. After learning a little bit about letters to editor and a little bit more about case reports, we are coming to a section on review articles. Today I'll be talking a little bit on the types of review articles, what the journal expects, and a little bit about how to do a systematic review and what is a meta-analysis. So I'll be giving you an overview of all these things. Review articles are very broad topics, and there are different kinds of reviews. So if you look at the IJA instructions to authors, you can see that review articles are mainly by invitation from the editor-in-chief, and the detailed instructions are given on what is supposed to be the word count and what is supposed to be the word count for the abstract and how it should be. The same thing in if you look at JOACP, or the Journal of Anesthesia and Clinical Pharmacology, you can say that you can submit review articles on your own, but it has to be with the communication with the editor-in-chief. And even systematic reviews and meta-analysis are also included in these review articles, and that they should be registered with Prospero. So again, they have their own word limit, reference limit, the abstract limit, and all such kinds of things. So what is actually review? What does the word review mean? The word review means that you're trying to examining or reconsidering something in order to decide if some changes are actually necessary and what was the previous thought process or knowledge. So what is a review article? So there have been various definitions for review articles. Some of them have said that you have to have 100 references. It has to be published in a review journal only. And some of them have said that it should be in the review section of a research journal, or the abstract should specify that it's a review article. But actually, the main, I think the best definition for a review article as such has been that it is a synthetic review and summary of what is known and unknown, recording what knowledge is available to us. So available to us. So what is the purpose of your review article? So your review article has to have something that is valuable to the clinician. He is going to learn a little bit from it. It has to be informative. It has to have solid evidences if possible. There has to be criticality in when you're writing your review articles. And this has to be a summary of all these things. And there has to be a well-defined topic. And this area has to interest most of the readers. It has to be something which is more recent. So if you take the types of review articles, there are many different types. There can be scoping reviews, historical reviews, systematic reviews, narrative reviews, etc., etc. But we'll just talk about a few of them that are actually, commonly found in anesthesia journals when you try to look for them. So the commonest kind is what is called as a narrative review. It describes primary studies. So you have a body of evidence. You have gone through a period of time. You have read a lot of articles, and you want to put up a summary of these articles. And you have selected these articles based on your interest or whatever. And this is called as a narrative review, and it usually does not employ any method of study of the results. It summarizes what have been most of the conclusions of most of these articles, and some of it may be your own personal opinion also. Historical reviews, again, they trace the development of science over a period of time and have some amount of temporal association, whereas your meta-analysis, they aggregate results and calculate a cumulative effect. Umbrella reviews are nothing but reviews of your meta-analysis and systematic reviews. So they summarize the results of various systematic reviews, identify systematic reviews, and summarize their results, and give an opinion about which would be the best. And scoping actually talk about the profile of existing studies, what are the types of studies that have been done, extent and range of the studies, but they have no emphasis on do not emphasize on the results. Whereas systematic reviews, they analyze studies related to topics systematically. There is a definite attention to methodology of the studies that are incorporated and the results that have been published. And they try to reduce the bias and errors, or at least try to declare the bias that is there in these articles. So if you see here, there is this is one of the articles that has been actually been published in Indian Journal of Anesthesia. You can see that the abstract has no structure, and there is just a paragraph, and most of the article is based on experience and experience of others. And overall, it does not follow the IMRAT pattern that is actually supposed to be followed by a research article. And probably this is a narrative review. If you go through some of the articles that are published in anesthesia, there is one article called the Historical Development of Modern Anesthesia, so it has some amount of temporal association. So this may also be published as a review. It can have, because it has a temporal association, it is called as historical reviews. Now, this is taken from the Cochrane database. Here you can see that this article actually has a structured format, has an abstract with a structured format, and there is specific objectives. The search methods are actually pretty well defined, and selection criteria of the articles are also very well defined. Then an analysis has been done, a risk of bias graph has been given, and this was probably a systematic review. Now, going on from a systematic review to a meta-analysis usually contains, you do a systematic review before you do a meta-analysis. And once you feel that all the articles, the data of all the articles, there is plenty of similarity between the articles, and you can pool the data, there is not going to be any heterogeneity among the type of articles that are included, then you can try to combine these results, and this may give a combined effect, which is important and is shown here in a meta-analysis. So umbrella reviews, again, as I said here, it is mentioned here that they did a literature search, they identified 313 articles, of which 6 meta-analyses were identified, and which concentrated on 25 outcomes, and they summarized these results and tried to combine these results. So this would probably be an umbrella review. And these articles can also be considered for publication as a review. So this is again a scoping review. It again has an abstract and a structured abstract. This is a review about retracted publications in anesthesiology. And it has a proper objective, a proper method. Results have been discussed, and conclusions have also been stated here. So coming to reviews, the common kinds of reviews that we see in our journals are narrative reviews and systematic reviews. If you look at the first one, it is a systematic review taken from a Cochrane database, whereas the second one, you can see the title itself, Melatonin in Perioperative Medicine, a Current Perspective. So it looks like a narrative review. So if you look at the evidence table, the reason why reviews need to be very, very thorough, and reviews need to be done with a proper systematic way is that it can be at the top of the evidence table. As you see, the top of the evidence table is very, very narrow and constitutes the systematic review and the meta-analysis. Even today, I think ICA and JOCP receive very few systematic reviews and meta-analysis, but these are increasing day by day. And I hope that we can publish more systematic reviews and meta-analysis in the future. Again, to reiterate, reviews are nothing but they are secondary publications. They constitute filtered information, and randomized controlled trials, cohort studies, and case control studies. All these are unfiltered information of primary articles which actually do the research. And these primary articles, if put together, constitute our secondary articles or reviews. So if you look at the evidence-based healthcare system, you see that systematic reviews and meta-analysis, guidelines, and government national policies are framed basically based on systematic reviews rather than randomized controlled trials and case controlled studies. So it's important that the the methodology of these systematic reviews are rigorous. So what is a systematic review and how to do a systematic reviews? Systematic review uses an explicit method to identify, select, appraise, and synthesize results from relatively similar but separate studies. So in simple terms, a systematic review gathers all the available empirical research in a clearly defined systematic manner to answer a specific research question. So if you look at the differences between narrative reviews and systematic reviews, generally narrative reviews have a very broad scope. So if you're planning for a narrative review, your scope of the article is going to be very, very broad. And the sources and search are generally not specified. And the appraisal of the article can be variable. It depends, it may even depend on the reader. And it usually is a qualitative summary rather than the quantitative summary in comparison to a systematic. So here you can see a systematic review where they have actually method in the method section, they have identified, they have tried to identify what is the search methods that were used. Then they have tried to identify what were the databases in which it was searched, where they searched for the articles, and the secondary databases. The primary databases were the Cochrane Central Registry, etc., etc. And then they have tried to talk about the inclusion criteria, the types of participants, etc. And whereas in a narrative review, it's just a simple abstract. They have talked about what is actually melatonin and synthesis and function of melatonin. So it's a general written based on general knowledge that has been gained from reading up about quite a few of articles about melatonin and its effects in anesthesia. So this is one more component that would be very, very important to declare in your writing the systematic review. A risk of bias graph. These are the 6 or 7 points that are very, very important that you have to assess when you're assessing the article, and this has to be declared before when you're trying to publish a systematic review. And you should remember that when you label your article or in your title of your article, you should be very clear whether it's a systematic review or a meta-analysis. Because systematic reviews are not always meta-analysis, but meta-analysis always includes a systematic review. So how do you do a systematic review? So there are various steps in which you conduct a systematic review. The first of which, like any other original research, would be formulating your research question. You have to have the PICO format out, and you have to define even the time frame of your search for your articles. Then you can always register your systematic review. Then you have to define your inclusion and exclusion criteria, go through an extensive literature search with a study selection, and you have to grade the quality of the evidence, then try to do a data extraction. You can analyze this data, then give the level of evidence, and you can present your research. So formulating a research question, as I mentioned, would depend on the PICO format. You can do a systematic review and meta-analysis of both RCTs or observational trials. This has to be mentioned clearly, what are the type of articles that have been included. And you need to register your research, determine your primary and secondary outcome, and they also have to be usually registered. So this is a website where you actually can register your systematic reviews, and registering it adds one more perspective to it. If it is registered in your Prospero, then you know that there is probably no similar systematic review being conducted or which has already been published. So it's important to declare that you have probably registered in Prospero. So you have to, again, define your inclusion and exclusion criteria in detail in your systematic review. You should be able to, what are the types of articles or study design of the articles that are included, what are the patient characteristics, publication status, language. It's very, very important. If you're an English-speaking country and you try to talk about an article that has been written in French, unless and until translation has been published by the journal, probably it would be better not to include it. And you have to have a research search period, you should have a good, you should declare the search period that you have actually used. It may be for the past 10 years, it may be for the past 20 years. So it depends on your perspective. You should declare what databases you have actually done the literature search in, and the study selection. There are quite a few databases such as Central, Embase, Medline. Embase, of course, is paid. Medline and Central are free. You can even quote your Google Scholar. There's nothing wrong with searching in a Google Scholar. And you can even quote your secondary databases that you're searching in, your CTRI or your other registries where you can get the results. Or sometimes they may be even physical, you may be able to do a literature search in your physical textbooks and get some articles that are related to your research question. So all these have to be declared in detail in your systematic research reviews. And coming to the quality of evidence, it's always better nowadays to declare your assess the quality of evidence based on the grade approach, which is universally accepted by more than 100 societies all over India. So this is so you can always say that as per the grade approach, randomized controlled trials, you can have a high level of confidence. Observational trials have a low level of confidence. So it's better to declare what is the method you have used to assess the quality of evidence, and better that it is the grade approach. Now, coming to data extraction, it's always better that the data extraction has been done by 2 independent investigators, and this is declared, and this data, and they have discussed about the data during the data extraction, after the data extraction, as to any kind of long data entries that have actually occurred, or any data that was actually heterogeneous during the data extraction that they have identified during the data extraction. So you have to declare, as I mentioned earlier, whether it is a meta-analysis. It is a statistical process of combining or pooling of data that is obtained from these articles, and this has to be represented in a common fashion among the studies. You should be able to say what is the type of variable that you have assessed, or that has been subjected to meta-analysis, whether it is dichotomous or whether it is a continuous variable. And you have to represent the relevant odds ratio or risk difference or mean difference or standard deviation, depending on the type of variable. So this here is actually a forest plot, and this is very important to declare your results in the form of a forest plot, because this is what gives you actually whether the results favor the intervention or the placebo. So there are different models, and it's very important in your systematic review to, or meta-analysis, to declare what model has been used for analysis of the data. You can see here that the heterogeneity, or I-square, there's something called as I-square, which is the heterogeneity is quite high. So when we did, when they applied the fixed model, they found that the heterogeneity was high. So they again applied the random effects model, which may be more appropriate. The heterogeneity is quite high. So if there is homogeneous data, of course, the I-square will be quite less than 25%, or less than 50% is good enough to say that it is homogeneous data. And this has to be represented in your results. When you're writing your results, you have to say that the data was homogeneous and I-square was so much. And yeah, the overall effect size can also be declared. So you have to, whenever you publish a systematic review or a meta-analysis, it's always better to look for the publication bias, plot the funnel plot, and this is better that it is represented in your article and shown in your article, and so that the reader or the editor is confident that you have selected the right kind of articles, or if there is some bias, you have applied the right kind of model to your articles. So you should also, your systematic review should always conform to the PRISMA guidelines. I think PRISMA has come out with a recent statement in 2020. And this actually gives in detail how your systematic review has to be reported And this is one flow chart that has to be included. If this is a previous review has already been done, then you can always mention the previous studies that were included in your previous review version of the review and the new studies that have been added to it. And you have to declare even the origin of the articles, whether it is from websites, organizations, citation searching, that is your secondary sources. And you have to declare this is a flowchart that is that better accompany your article always, so that your editor knows that a thorough, rigorous methodology has been followed, and he would be ready to publish your systematic review. So again, there is a checklist, and it's better to go through this checklist given at the Prisma 2020 website. And you see that it's better to show where actually, at what paragraph actually the particular point has been mentioned. For example, identify the report as a systematic review. So the title should contain the terms that it's a systematic review or it's a meta-analysis. And you have a checklist for abstract and similar kinds of checklists. So you should go through the whole Prisma guideline as you're writing the article and try to include all the aspects. Remember that when it comes to a meta-analysis, garbage in is garbage out. So you have to be very, very careful when you're trying to do a meta-analysis of what you're going to include in your, what kind of studies you're going to include and what kind of statistics you're going to portray, because it may convey no meaning, and in the end, you may not be able to get a proper conclusion. And there are ways to detect that this may not be an appropriate test or an appropriate method for your systematic review. So definitely an expert in this will be able to detect that. But if properly done, conducted, it is the highest level of evidence and there's the highest chance of publication. And also 2 or 3 points that I would like to add: try not to duplicate your systematic reviews. Already done systematic reviews, if you are able to identify a few more articles, it's better to add on to a few more articles to that systematic review, but just don't try to repeat the same systematic review. It will not give you any other further information. So these are my references and suggested reading. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pradeep, for taking us through the various nitty-gritties of the review articles. And yes, we need to understand the various type of review articles when we talk about the evidence-based medicine. And you have nicely covered up when we talk about the narrative reviews, the scoping reviews, and finally the systematic reviews and requiring meta-analysis. We need to understand why they are required, why they need to be done, and what is the understanding when they are published. So as an editor also, and as a reader also, we need to understand the need for a particular type of review, and you have nicely tried to incorporate the basic ingredients that must be a part of it and how to choose one. So I think we'll be coming to the questions after the next session. And the next important session is when we talk about the publication of any research article. Most of the editors would like to see whether the protocol which has been initiated by the researcher, are they available on certain platform? And that's become, in essence, it's not just we are trying to verify the things, but it is also sometimes becomes ethical not to duplicate a study at multiple centers. And these requires various repositories or registries where it has to be. So I think this becomes important, and we have the best person to take it forward, Dr. Nishant Kumar, professor at Lady Hardinge Medical College. He is one of the prolific academician. He's a prolific writer. He's a prolific, I think he's a multi-talented person, and he will do a very justice to this topic of registries for research and publication. He's associated with journal editors for the last so many years, and I'm sure his key points based on the evidence as well as his experience will help us to understand why, when, what all needs to be done when we talk about registries. Over to you, Dr. Nishant Kumar.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Rakesh, for the kind introduction, and thank you for this opportunity to talk on an important aspect. Now, we know that there are certain registries for research and publications. These are basically required for clinical trials. Now, what is a clinical trial by definition? So if you go by the definition of a clinical trial, it's a research study which assigns human participants prospectively to one or more interventions to evaluate effects on health outcome. Now, it could be a device, it could be a drug, it could be comparison. Basically, it includes all trials, phase 1 to phase 4. So basically, whenever we are dividing the human participants to different groups, that basically constitutes a clinical trial, whether we are observing one particular thing or another. And whenever we try to control the conditions of the trial, it is a clinical trial. And by convention, by law, all such clinical trials have to be registered prospectively. Now, what is a trial registration? So what do we mean by a trial registration? A trial registration is nothing but we have to provide information and it has to be published regarding, it's a set of information. It's basically certain points about the trial which you're going to conduct on a particular website, on a particular registry regarding the design. What is the design of your study? How you're going to do it? What are the inclusion exclusion criteria? What is the primary objective? What are the secondary objective? What are the time frames? And there are other such questionnaires and points which will come to later. So these all points have to be agreed before you start a trial. Now, many times it has been said that research is like a fishing pond. You just sit there and then evaluate what you have caught. No, it is not that. A trial is basically proceeding on set lines, set guidelines, which you have already defined. And these defined guidelines have to be made public before you can actually start recruiting patients. So it is the design, conduct, and how you administration, overall control this clinical trial. So that is basically part of trial registration. Now, why should one register a trial? That is one, that whatever you're trying to do, all the participants and everything, they are informed. The public is informed of any trial which is going on. It has a chance to reduce publication bias and selective reporting. Now, the thing is that you have committed that, okay, you'll study A, B, and C. Now, when you conduct your study, you find out, okay, C is not going on with what I had thought of initially. It is going negative to what I started with. So let me omit C. No. So you cannot omit C because you have committed that you will report on A, B, and C. So now that you have made it public, it is there in the public eye. Whenever we review an article, we go to this registration site, see what the protocol was, and you cannot deviate from it. So that is why you cannot selectively report. And again, it has been commonly seen, okay, we have got this much data. We'll collect some additional data which we had not committed to. Now that we are doing this study, or as the study progresses, we'll commit this data and then make out 2 papers of that particular data. No, that is not allowed. So whenever we are making our protocol public, that means that we are sticking to that and we cannot deviate from that. As per the Declaration of Helsinki, that is the declaration which controls the human trials registration in a public database before first recruitment, before you start study, before you start the study, before you enroll the patient, that information has to be provided in a public database. Also, as was there in the Prospero, as Dr. Pradeep had told about, awareness of identical trials to avoid duplication. When you register your trial, you come to know whether this trial has been done before or not. And when you're describing the progress, now remember, when you're providing this information has to be updated every 6 months. So you can always identify the gaps. If you found out that there were some challenges or there was something wrong, you can correct that by writing to the trial registry. Also, when this is basically for the grant purposes and the industry purposes, the researchers and the potential participants, they can know what kind of trials are going on. The industry can approach you. And if you're doing a trial on behalf of the industry, certain researchers can reach out. Okay, fine. This is my area of study. I can help with this trial. Similarly, between 2 universities, okay, this is a trial going on in this particular college. okay, I have similar interests. Let us expand it to our college also. Then we'll have a multi-center study. The initial, when you submit the data, there's an option of submitting your data also. So it will help in improvement in quality and identification of potential problems also, whether there's a problem in the data, whether the statistical test applied have been correct or not. As Dr. Dive had said in the initial presentation, that most of the responses are, okay, there was this slight problem which was there. Now, if it is there in the public domain, and as you are updating your data, other people can view that, other people who are following this particular trial, they can notice, okay, this is a slight problem that you're having, and you can probably correct it before you actually move on, or you publish the actual results. So there you have this, everything is made transparent and public, and this can be beneficial. Now, which trials have to be registered? Practically, all clinical trials, all randomized trials, wherever you are assigning groups, wherever you're doing an intervention, all trials have to be registered. Observational studies may optionally be registered. It is not mandatory to register them. And any trial after September 13th, 2005. So any time that you're recruiting a patient for an interventional trial after 2005, you have to have a registered trial prospectively. That means that before you enroll that patient, your protocol should be available on one of the registries which is approved by WHO. So again, where should these trials be registered? Now, International Committee of Medical Journal Editors accepts primary registries in WHO network. So what are these primary registries? There are many registries which are available, but there are certain primary registries in the WHO network. WHO itself does not have its own registry, but certain countries and regions have been provided the option. They have their registries, and they are the primary registry recognized by the WHO that they are doing good work, and they conform to the standards set by the WHO. So the specific criteria are the content, that is, there's a checklist of 20 to 24 points, whether the registry offers those 20 to 24 points to the public, the quality and the validity, whether the quality of the data submit and whether the tests applied or the statistics that are going to be performed, whether the primary objective, secondary objective, how they're going to be observed, whether they're valid or not. Again, the validity of the researchers. That means whether it's a false trial, whether the person exists or not, whether the trial is in process or not, everything is to be confirmed by the registry. Accessibility. The accessibility means that the trial information has to be available free of cost to everyone 24/7, 365 days an year. And once registered, it cannot be removed from the database. It is for posterity. So any trial which is registered, anyone can access it through the trial number or the keywords or the author or the institute. It can be accessed anywhere, anytime by anyone. Unambiguous identification. Now, each trial which is registered is provided a proper number by the primary registry, and then by the WHO, by the UTN. Then there should be a technical capacity by the registry to perform all these. Now, there are two different terms basically. One is a register, one is a registry. A register just means a database, that is a collection of data of the various trials that are being registered. Now, when we talk of a registry is the entire component, the people working behind to maintain that register. So the registry should have the technical capacity to undertake and control these trials, to validate, to make it accessible, and to verify the content. And overall, the administration and governance is usually provided by the government of that country or region. By country, that means a particular country. By region, we mean a group of countries. So it is not a region within a country. And usually the primary registry is only one in a country or a region. You cannot have two primary registries within a country or a region. And it is usually government controlled. The government has a stake in it, and government provides aids and help to maintain this particular registry. So the various registries, Australian, New Zealand, Brazilian, Chinese, Korean, Indian. So Clinical Trial Registry of India is one of the primary registries of the WHO, Cuba, European Union. Now this is the region. Now the whole of Europe except for UK, has its own trials register. German is again separate. Iran, Japan, Lebanon, Thailand, Netherlands, Pan-African. So it is the entire Africa, Peru, and Sri Lanka. So these are the primary registries which are there with the WHO. Now you can register with any of these registries. These are usually open to all researchers anywhere in the world. And usually it is preferable to do it with a regional or the country-specific registry, but you can do it with anything. And the most important of all is the clinicaltrials.gov. That is the US registry. That is also a primary registry. So you can register with any of these registries. So basically, why do we do that? Now, again, as I said, that it gives you more transparency. The reviewers, the authors, the other people, they can say, okay, this is a genuine thing. Whatever has been published has been committed to before, that you're not deviating from the path. And when you publish your protocol, there are researchers who would follow that particular, if they have that same area of interest, they might collaborate with you. So it is an sort of a networking thing also. And then when you go through these registries, you look for certain topics, you go through the protocols, you can actually identify, okay, this is a particular trial going on. Maybe I can do better. Maybe I can deviate. Maybe they have missed out something and I can plan my own study. So that is the benefit of a registry. Now, remember all journals, JOCP and IJA are part of ICMJE, and it is mandatory for all clinical trials to be registered with a primary registry of WHO. Now you can register with more than one registers, but one of them has to be the primary registry as mentioned with the WHO. So how do we do that? Now the most commonly done is the CTRI. So what do you do first? You register for an account at CTRI. Now, the particulars and the email that you enter, you have to enter someone, your guide, your superior, or some eminent scholar, or one of the teachers in the universities or the college to vouch for you. Okay, this is your account, and the particulars that you have provided for opening the account are correct. So basically, if my PG wants to register an account for at CTRI, they'll have to provide an email. An email will come to me and I'll have to vouch for it. Okay, fine, this person is legitimate and he wants to open an account at CTRI. So that is how you open an account. You are provided with an username and a password. You log in, and when you log in, you click on add a new trial. It opens a page, the main page, and there's an option on click on add a new trial. The moment you click on that, a new window opens and it says a public title and a scientific title and a trial acronym. Can you give me a minute, please? Okay. So you give a public title, you give a scientific title, and trial acronym if possible. Now, public title has to be in very simple language, in common words, which a layman can understand. Scientific title is the one which you have decided for your study. Trial acronym is optional. And then here in CTRI, you have the option of whether it is an Ayurveda trial or an allopathic trial. So you just select yes or no. Always remember to click on proceed. Now, the moment you have done this, you are directed again to the home page. Yeah, so this is how it appears. When you open, it says click here to add new trial. When you click on this, the previous window opens. And once you have given the public title and the scientific title, it comes as pending. Now, this trial I had registered as NKM, scientific title, just to show you that how it is done. Now, reference number and CTI number is pending. So this is how the screen will look once you have given the public title and the scientific title. All you have to do is click on update here. So once you click update, a certain set of parameters which are to be provided open up. So public title of study and scientific title of study you've already done. Next, you go to part 2. You click on this and the window opens like this. So the selected trial is NKM, as I said. Secondary ID. Now, secondary ID is if you want to register with some other trial registry, that is where you get the secondary ID. You may or may not add it. Then principal investigator or overall trial coordinator, you provide your details. Then you give the contact person for the scientific query and public query. People may actually ask what you're going to do, what are the harms, what are the benefits of the trial. So all this thing. Remember, you have to click on proceed after each entry and then click on go to the next part. So the moment you go on to the next part is monetary and material support. If it's a thesis, you can just write institutional, add new, you have to give the name of your source, college, whatever is there, the name of the primary sponsor. If it's a grant, then you mention those details, right? Type is whether it's government, private funded, and secondary sponsor also, like if you have the institutional support and a funded research, the countries of recruitment. Now, if it's a Indian study, you just select India. If it's a multi-centric international study, you select all the countries that are relevant. Again, you click on proceed. It will say that the record has been added, and you go to the next part. Site of the study, where actually you are going to conduct this study. If it's a drug-based study, you'll need to furnish whether DCGI approval is needed or not. And if it is indeed needed, when was the document approved, and you have to attach that particular document. Similarly, you have to attach your ethics committee certificate as well. Now, the most important part is, next thing is health condition. Now, most of the thesis or the studies that we do are on patients, right? So we just click on the health condition, add health condition and trial participant details. We just select patients, that's it. We don't give the ICD classification, proceed, and we move on to the next step. Now, once we give the condition as patients, next we get the whether it's a postgraduate thesis or not, and the type of trial is interventional, observational, whatever, and then it gives you this window. So instead of adding the conditions, if you can add the ICD-10 conditions, like if you want to do a study only in lap poly patients, so you say, okay, disease of the gallbladder, that is okay. That is that is the subset of the patients that you're going to select. Similarly, if you're going for breast surgery, you select conditions of the breast, whether benign or malignant. Now, if your disease is wide, like laparoscopic surgeries, it can be gynecological, it can be surgical, it can include a host of other problems. So what you can do is you can just click on surgical anesthesia and then proceed. Now, study design is important, whether it is a randomized control trial, whether it is non-randomized, whether it is observational. So that study design, blinding, so all those things you have to select from the drop-down box and enter details, proceed, go to the next part. As we had selected interventional study, because that is the most common thing that we do, we have the intervention in the comparator agent. So basically that is nothing but the groups. So you add new, the intervention and the comparator agent. Then we add the inclusion criteria, that is age, gender, any other inclusion criteria that you have, click on proceed. Similarly, you add the exclusion criteria, click on proceed. Now, if it was a randomized study, then method of generating randomized sequence, method for allegation of concealment, blinding and masking if applicable. So all these details have to be provided for an interventional study, and then you click on proceed, go to the next part. Now, remember, all these details you normally use and supply in your methods, but here it is available and it acts as a cross-check whether you have used these particular data sets in your protocol or not. Okay, so we go to the next part. Next part is the primary outcome, time points. Time points is important exactly when you're going to measure these. So again, you fill in the information and click on proceed. Similarly, for secondary outcomes, you enter the outcome, you enter the time points, and then click on proceed. So when you click on proceed, the information that you have provided gets saved onto the website. And then again, you have to give the sample size as you have calculated, the phase of the trial, phase 1 to phase 4, you have to select date of first enrollment. Now, remember, it usually takes around 15 to 20 days for this entire data set and a registration number to be allotted to you. So the date of first enrollment should always be around 20 days to 1 month after you have started filling up this form. And remember, you cannot enroll any patient, you cannot do your first case until your trial is permitted and you have a trial registration number. Okay, then you say estimated duration, and at the end, as I said, you have to review this every 6 months. So once your study is completed, you have to enter when was your last patient enrolled in your study. Okay, again proceed, go to the next part. So global status, you'll say not yet recruiting. India status, not yet recruiting, because you cannot recruit patients till you have the registration done. So after that, publication details, again, that comes once your study is completed. Brief summary, you just give the introduction and justification of the trial. That is usually sufficient. No references required. Click on proceed. And after that, you click when you are sure that your information is correct. You have given all the information. You submit trial to the CTRI. After you submitted trial to the CTRI, then there will be another page which appears, which says whether you like to provide the data once the study is completed or not. So that is up to you whether you would like to provide the data that you have collected during the period of your study. It is still optional. It is not mandatory to provide the data, but you have to give that option. You have to give that choice, and you can modify it later also. So after you have done this, after you have submitted the trial to CTRI, you will get something which is called a reference number. Now, this is where the majority of the students, majority of the people are stuck. They say, okay, we've got a reference number. This is the trial registration number. No, this is just a reference number. So you'll get something like REF, the year, the month, and the number of the study that you are in. So remember, this will tell you 2012, September 00400 is the number for my reference study, which has been submitted to CTRI, but that is not the end of it. Now, remember, there'll be queries. So whenever you log in, you go into this thing, the tab of trial clarification and modification. CTRI number won't be there. It will still be pending. This will give you a date when it was sent back to you, type of trial, whether DCGI clearance was available or is applicable or not, whether you have provided EC clearance or not. And then you have to click on clarification to see what clarification they have asked for. And you have to answer and make modifications in the entire data set that you have provided till now. And then again, click on submit. Now, remember, this is not a one-time process. They might review it 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, even 10 times till they are not satisfied that the study that you are doing, that the information that you have provided is appropriate or not. So once they are satisfied that the information that you have provided is correct, that it is going and it conforms to the trial that you're conducting, only then you will get the CTRI number. So once you get the CTRI number, that means that your trial is registered, and this is the final number which you have to quote in all your studies whenever you are sending for publication. Remember, all international journals, they do not accept any clinical trial, any interventional trial, any RCT, unless until you provide with the trial registration number. And remember, CTRI also, it does not accept retrospective registration. So that means that if your study has started in 2017 and you're trying to say in 2022, and now you're going to try and register your trial now. So, and if you give the date of recruitment as in 2022, it will not accept it. You have to start recruiting the patients only after you have obtained a CTRI number. So there are many students who don't realize, okay, fine, I have to register. They miss on they think this reference number is absolutely fine. We are already registered. Then they wake up from their sleep. Okay, fine. Okay, I have to get a CTRI number, or they're informed that they have to have a CTRI number. And then they get the clarification, and they falsely give a wrong date. Remember, whenever the trial comes to us for publication, for review, we see the CTRI number. Now, as I said, it is CTRI 2012-09-003011. So that means that this trial was registered in 2012 in the month of September, and this is the number, right? So again, the thing is that we have to see that, and suddenly you'll say, okay, fine, I have given the CTRI number, and I'll just write, I started my study. The study period is from, say, June 2011 to June 2014, May 2014. Now, here I can catch you. You have said that you have started the study in June, but you have registered your trial only in September. So that is ethically wrong. You could not have started your study, and it is mandatory for all theses also. Recently, one of the very eminent professors, it happened in Delhi conference only, that we made it mandatory that CTRI has to be there for T. Jha, because this is all for studies. So we said, okay, observational studies may be exempt, but all interventional trials have to have a CTRI. So very eminent professor had a fight with me. How can you make it mandatory? So I calmly said that you are a guide. You are an editor of an eminent journal. You know that it is mandatory. Now, if you don't have a registry number, how can you justify a study being carried on? So please remember, it is legally and ethically wrong not to proceed with the study unless until you have registered it. And remember, this is the number that you have. You have to update it every 6 months. Like this was sent back to me in 2018, whether this has been completed or not, and whether it has been published or not. Once it's published, you have to provide the publication details also, so that those people who are following it, or if someone wants to go search as a registry and is interested in your work, will find the publication details and go directly to that particular page. So that is the thing. And you should always have a registration number to quote, and it should be valid. And please do not start your study unless until you get this number. With this, I'll end my talk. Thank you. Over to you, Dr. Rakesh. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nishant, for this beautiful session. And I must thank all the speakers for very informative key points that will be useful for them during the publication. That needs to be included. If you have some questions, we can have it. Develina, can you just check from the chat if you have some question, or Dr. Radhakrishnan wants to say something? So
Could you mute it, sir?
Develina.
Yes, sir, I'm here. So we have not received any question from the audience till now.
Right, I think
in that case, you can wind up, Rajesh.
Yeah, so
say something about the impact factor also. Okay, impact factor is all covered. Yeah.
Right, sir. I think when we talk about the importance of a publication to readers, we need to incorporate all those important points which has been discussed today by the eminent speakers. And when we try to do it, the quality of the publications increases because we are including various points. And also we need to understand that when a person do a research, probably he had an experience of including the nitty-gritty. He may be doing everything fine, but for readers, the message should be very clear that it has been done in a methodological way. And that is what the quality of any journal is. And that is what we want. It's just not the quality of journal. What we want is that a single study is going to impact thousands of patients through various clinicians. And that is why we want that whatever is being published should be in a very scientific, methodological way of its publication. And these points were highlighted. Maybe in subsequent sessions, sometime we will talk about different types of original articles. And these are essential for improving the standards of a journal. And that is what Dr. Radhakrishnan is saying. When we talk about the indexing agencies like PubMed, like Medline, when we talk about the citation indexes, when we talk about the impact factor, when we talk about the Medline indexation, when we talk about the Clarivate analytics, these are basically analyzed of a published literature based on the parameters that has been discussed today. And there are certain other things that needs to be done. I think we can leave it for editors group sometimes later. This may not be a good discussion for the audiences who are listening for the benefit of the publication. But yes, editors put a lot of emphasis on this because the repute of the journal will depend upon these small things. For example, Dr. Nishant was mentioning about the CTRI. We were talking about the ethical clearance of a particular study. If these things are not noted into a published paper, then it becomes an issue for the integrity of that particular journal. And that's why we want that all those components must be there when you are putting up in a publication. The other aspect is the point which Dr. Pradeep Dongre was mentioned, that not only we have to follow certain published reporting guidelines. And the Equator Network is one of the very good website where each type of publication, starting from whether it is an original article, the retrospective study, the randomized control trial, or the systematic review meta-analysis, or even as such case reports, there are certain reporting guidelines which will incorporate all those important points. And hence, this is a humble request to all the person who are listening to us, that when you write a manuscript, just write an equivalent reporting guideline from the Equator Network website and try to see that whether all those points has been incorporated into your protocol. Start from the protocol site, and when you send it for publication, ensure that all those points have been taken up. I'm sure the eminent speakers has given us a lot of important messages. If we can incorporate into our guidelines, definitely it will be difficult for me to reject a manuscript, and we have a limited page strength into our journal. So obviously we will try to incorporate more publications, but yes, only when it has certain standards. It is standard, I mean that it is going to benefit the readers, and thus it is going to benefit the patients. And that is what the impact, that is what the main motto of any journal is. And I'm sure all the potential authors will try to incorporate all those important points. So once again, thank you, Dr. Nishant, Dr. Divya, Dr. Sudesh, Dr. Pradeep, for sparing time and putting up such an important points, which will be essential for the publications. Over to Dr. Radhakrishnan.
Thank you, Rakesh. Before we wind up officially, something which I left out, I want to say that next week's webinar is an international webinar. The webinar is being organized by American Society of Anaesthesiologists for us. And webinar is moderated by Dr. Bellani, Kumar Bellani of Minnesota, who is our international dean. And he, with certain other friends of America, will be doing their webinar on certain specific topics. So kindly attend next week's webinar, which is not that one usually being done by us. And welcome you all to the next week's webinar. And I request Dr. Belli to say the formal vote of thanks.
Well, thank you so much, sir. What a webinar it was. There was a lot to know, and it was very appropriately worded, scientific publications, what we need to know. And I think with all the knowledge which the learned speakers have provided to the audience, it's surely going to make Dr. K's job a little more difficult. Either he'll have to make the journals a little more fat so that he can accommodate everyone, or else he'll have to increase the number of volumes. Well, friends, this was a very unique webinar, unique in the sense that we talk about anesthesia, regional anesthesia, general anesthesia, intubation, oxygen carrying capacity, and a lot of things related to anesthesia, whether it is the techniques or it is the drugs or anything related to what we use in anesthesia. But this kind of information we don't get in any textbooks. It's only with the word of mouth and the senior people who have contributed to various journals. It's from their experience, and they pass on that experience to the youngsters. So that way, I think this is a very unique webinar, and of course, it will be, I'm sure it would be a lot of help to the youngsters, particularly who are beginning or who are stepping into the world of academic publications. So I would thank all the four speakers. Dr. Divya, she started so well with the letters. I mean, letters are not just some people consider that it is just a few lines and that's it. But the letters can have a lot of significance, because they can provide food for thought for subsequent research, or some idea. There may be something new that may come up in the mind. It was Dr. Sudesh Kannan then who talked about the case reports. Again, the case reports are something which are quite important. It may be stimulus for further studies, further research. May, as he said it, they might spark something new spark some idea, spark some research question, which the person can subsequently put, to test. When it was Dr. Pradeep Dongre, it was an extensive article on the review, how to publish it, and what is the significance of the review articles, what are the various kinds of review articles that you have. And Dr. Nishant Kumar thereafter, this information which he has provided, registries for research publication, because now it is becoming more and more significant. I think it's becoming very, very imperative for everyone to know that when you conduct the research, as he has very nicely highlighted, that before you start conducting it, you must register yourself, because otherwise no foreign journal will be looking at your work. And friends, there couldn't have been a better moderator for this particular webinar, better than Dr. Rakesh Garg, who is now the editor of Indian College of Anaesthesiologists, as you all know. A very accomplished, very academic, and a person who has published a lot. And I think in the years to come, we'll hear much more about him with regard to his academic contribution to various journals, and of course to Indian scientific literature. Well, on behalf of Indian College of Anaesthesiologists, all the leadership of Indian College of Anaesthesiologists, I thank all the speakers and of course the moderator once again for the excellent webinar that has been done. Thank you so much, and till we meet again next week, good night, stay happy, stay healthy.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you all, and good night.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, sir.
Good
Thank
night.
you. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you and good night.
Thank you, sir. Good night.